Hispanic Heritage Month. I am so excited for this. We've got three amazing, accomplished authors, all Latina, all from different backgrounds, all from different heritages, and let's just take this moment to celebrate it, and let's get right into it. So my name is Yvonne Downs. I am the project manager of communication at LearningQuest. My co-host is Rochelle. She is also with LearningQuest. And to give you just a quick little backstory of what we kind of do, we're a nonprofit literacy center located in Stanislaus County, California. We offer programs to earn a high school diploma, learn English, as well as provide reading and writing tutoring for adults and one-on-one tutoring for children diagnosed with dyslexia. We are one of only 4 entities offering classes to prepare to prepare for the high school equivalency test, and one of only 2 offering instruction in Spanish. And I just want to take a moment to thank everyone. This is something that kind of just came out of the blue. Because we saw a need for it. We think that this is very important, especially in the line of work that we are in. I mean, we have a very big Hispanic demographic when it comes to our nonprofit and our community. In our nonprofit, 62% of all of our students last year for the 2019-2020 fiscal year were Latino. And so we see that we have a huge demographic, and this is something I think that needs to be done and to promote the importance of literacy in our community. So with that, I will go ahead and get into introducing our authors. So we're going to start off with Adrianna Cuevas, author of The Total Eclipse of Nestor Lopez and The Soon-to-Be Cuba in My Pocket. Adrianna Cuevas is a first-generation Cuban-American, originally from Miami, Florida. A former Spanish and ESOL teacher, Adriana currently resides in Austin, Texas with her husband and son. When she's not wrangling multiple pets and practicing fencing with her son, she's writing her next middle grade novel. Everyone, please welcome Miss Adrianna Cuevas. Yay! Hello, Adriana.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so happy that you were able to be a part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't you go ahead and actually give us a little bit of a synopsis of The Total Eclipse of Nestor Lopez?
Oh, sure. Nestor Lopez is a middle grade contemporary fantasy. It's about a boy from a military family who has moved around a ton, but he finally gets the chance to live with his abuela when he moves to New Haven, Texas. And even though he's starting his 10th first day of school and he's just waiting for when his mom is going to tell him they're moving again, his one goal is to make sure that nobody finds out his deepest, darkest secret, which is that he can talk to animals. But the animals in town start to go missing, and Nestor has to decide whether or not he's going to risk revealing his secret to help save the day against this Tule Vieja, this witch that is threatening the town. So it's a lot of fun. It's a good mix of spooky and funny. And then it has some good moments with a kid who has a dad who's deployed. And then it's chock full of Cuban food and Spanish because I just can't not do that. So.
Hey, it's perfect for the Halloween season too.
Yes, it is. It really is.
All right, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And for everyone in the chat, you can find her book at indiebound.org. And I love this. I love that you are supporting this org that is like a search engine. You search for the book that you want and it'll find you the book in your local bookstore that you can then purchase from them. And I tried it, and yesterday's bookstore in Modesto has it. Just a little shout out.
Another one that does that is bookshop.org. It's the same function as IndieBound. So those are 2 good alternative websites.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for that. And of course, I provided your Instagram handle as well, if people want to go and follow you there. So thank you so much, Adriana.
Thanks.
All right. And our next author, Miss O. Salazar de Breaux, also known as Olympia. So Salazar de Breaux grew up in Olympia, Washington with her 5 younger sisters. An entrepreneur and community leader with a long career in public service, Salazar de Breaux is also an incurable creative who's inspired by her Mexican-American heritage. Her work incorporates her love of family, food, music, and culture. She lives there with her husband, her sweetheart of more than 20 years, and their 2 sons who she considers her greatest achievements. And Sisters of Element is her debut novel. Hello, Olivia.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Oh,
Yay!
so
I'm like a puppet. Hercules, Hercules.
I'm so excited, and thank you so much for being also essentially one of the first people to help kind of create this as well. You were the person that kind of just we clicked really fast, and then this just sort of evolved into the panel.
I love that we can do that now. It seems like we're connecting with people a lot further out now because of COVID. When we're doing this virtually, so
Yeah.
I'm grateful too for the connection, and I just love that this turned into like a panel of poderosas, man. Like, you know, this is really cool that we have all these amazing women being part of this and showing our arts. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. I'm just so blown away by how great this has become, and also the connections with you 3 amazing ladies. But jumping in, let's jump into, so tell me a little bit. I have my little book right here.
Oh, snap. There he goes.
Right next to me. Go ahead and give me a little synopsis of or give everyone, I guess, a little synopsis of what Sister of Elements is about.
Yeah, so Sisters of Element is a young adult fantasy fiction. It's the first in a series, so I'm working on book 2 right now. It's about the Luna sisters. They are 4 Mexican-American women growing up in the Pacific Northwest who all have special powers based on the elements: earth, air, fire, and water. This one is told from the narrative of Angelina, who is the oldest sister, and her power is based in water. She's also a healer, and she's really protective of her sisters, and her younger sister Val has some things happen in her life, and so she gets really worried about Val with she's got a new boyfriend who seems like a really bad dude. I mean, you kind of got this sixth sense about this thing. Your spidey senses start going off, and you kind of like, what's this guy all about, right? And she just starts learning that her sister's in danger, and it kind of goes from there. And aside from being really cool because, you know, they have these special powers and they're badasses, it's also about heart and about family and about the power of unconditional love. What would you do to protect your family? So yeah, it's I know, I'm not getting all choked up, girl. But I understand that dynamic of sisters. So definitely the sisterhood and the relationships come across. And hopefully for me, like when people read it, I hope that they feel my heart and that they feel a connection to the sisters. Because I fell in love with them. It seemed like at a certain point, the story was writing itself because the sisters were just becoming their own people. So yeah, I hope I told enough about it. I can go on and on.
I can't wait to start getting into it. I've read a couple pages, so busy, you know, but I'm so excited to be reading it. And thank you so much for being here. And you can find her book at her website, salazardebreaux.com. And also I provided her Instagram as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and apparently it's also on Indie, IndieBound? IndieBound? Yeah. I didn't realize that until Adriana told me. I was like, hey, oh my God. IndieBound.org, thank you.
All right, and our last but not least author, we have Adrianna Herrera. Adriana was born and raised in the Caribbean. She loves writing stories about people who look and sound like her people, getting unapologetic happy endings. Her Dreamer series has received star reviews from Publishers Weekly and Booklist and has been featured in The Today Show on NBC, Entertainment Weekly, Oprah Magazine, NPR, Library Journal, The New York Times, and The Washington Post. She's also a trauma therapist in New York City, working with survivors of domestic and sexual violence. please welcome Adriana Herrera. Hello,
Hi.
Adriana.
Thanks for having me.
Hello. Thank you for being a part of this. Again, I keep saying I'm so excited because I am.
You get to have this chance to talk to other Latinas.
Mm-hmm. And we have two Adrianas here. So anytime I refer to you guys, I'll just say Adriana H or Adriana C. Yeah, thank you so much. And I am just so excited to have you on this panel because not only are you Latina, you're Afro-Latina, and that is something that should be celebrated as well. And I'm just blown away by this. So you have the Dreamer series. What I find interesting is that it's about for Afro-Latinos.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's incredible as well, a female writing about Latinos. So give us a little synopsis of what the series is essentially about.
Yeah, so this is my debut series. The first book is American Dreamer. And they're all queer romances. The series itself is about four Afro-Latinx men who are best friends. They met in the Bronx where they grew up, and it's like each of their love stories. So that's kind of like the gist of the series. Dreamer is about Ernesto Vasquez, and he is an Afro-Dominican food truck chef. So he takes his food truck up to Ithaca, New York, to upstate New York from New York City to try and make it a success there. And then he falls for a librarian. So there's a lot of Afro-Latinx burritos, and they fall in love. So each of the stories follows each of the guys. So Camilo is the second book, and he's Cuban, Jamaican. The third book is Patrice, who's Haitian, and the fourth book is Juan Pablo, who is Puerto Rican.
I love that. That is such a diverse series. I'm gonna have to pick it up and read it. Again, thank you so much. And you can find her book at her website, adrianaherreraromance.com. And I've also provided her Instagram as well for anyone that is interested in following her. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited, you three. Okay, let's go ahead. And if I can work my mouse correctly. Okay, so before we get into the questions, just some house rules real quick. So let's go ahead and do a check-in real quick in chat. For anyone that is watching in our audience, go ahead and go in there and provide your name. Tell us what your name is, if you're from an organization, and go ahead and let me think. Let's do why you decided to sign up for this panel, what intrigued your interest and everything, and you can go ahead and send that into the chat to LQSLC. Let me see, Rochelle. Are you able to see the chat, Rochelle? Okay. All right, see if you can go ahead and find her there. And while that's happening, I'll go over the rest of the house rules. So any questions that you have, you'll be sending them to LQSLC privately in chat. We'll save the last 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A to our lovely authors. And please be respectful. And also, while you're in the chat, feel free to jump into discussion at all if there's something you agree with, if there's something that you're just like, yes, I have the same thing, like I can relate to that. Go ahead and put that in there as well. We'd love to see your enthusiasm. And most importantly, let's just have fun. Let's just celebrate Hispanic heritage in this panel. This is all about our culture and our heritage and just sharing it with the world. So thank you all for joining, and who's ready for some questions? All right. Let's go ahead. I hope that the chat is going good. All right, got thumbs up. All right, so let's jump into the first question. So one of the biggest things that I wanted to touch upon is like the authors that inspired you guys. And why was their work so meaningful to you? As three Latina authors, you know, finding inspiration in other authors is something that, you know, even with myself as a painter, you know, I find inspiration in other painters. And so I kind of just wanted to ask that question out. Let's go ahead and actually let's start with Adriana H.
I'm muted. So, I mean, I have a lot of authors who, I mean, I write romance, right? So I have a lot of romance authors that have inspired me, but Latinx authors, I think, two that are really influential for me specifically, because I read a lot. I've always read a lot, but I've always been a romance lover. I've always been a voracious romance reader. And two Latinas who I write a lot about food. And so Laura Esquivel, who wrote Como Agua para Chocolate, is one of my favorite authors. And that book specifically really had an impact on me. Well, the movie and the book when they came out, because it really had that like sensuality to it. And of course, like we had telenovelas, which I also love and have been inspired by. But Como Agua para Chocolate was just a different way of showing romance. And then Isabel Allende is also a big influence for me. It's also about that because she writes a lot about relationships and love. And she has one book that came out years and years ago. I'm from the Dominican Republic, and I grew up there. So, you know, we had books in Spanish. She had a book that came out maybe, I want to say like 20 plus years ago, called Aphrodita. And it was all about like recipes and like foods that were aphrodisiac. So those two women, I think, definitely were a big influence for me in terms of like Latina women writing about love and relationships and like pleasure and women's pleasure specifically. And I think that's why it was meaningful to me, because of course I was reading my little like romances in English, but they gave me the Latina perspective in romance and pleasure for women and eroticism.
Okay, awesome. I've never heard of that, so I'll have to look into it. Thank you for that. Let's go ahead. Who would like to go next, Olivia or Adriana?
I'm fine either way.
All right, let's go Adriana. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'll go. For me, so I think this, I will be as bold to say, I think probably for a lot of us growing up, we did not see ourselves in books because they weren't there so much. And so growing up for me, yeah, I didn't, the books that I liked were not ones that I felt like showed my culture at all. I was obsessed with Edgar Allan Poe because I'm a huge horror fan, but like dead white guy. And then I actually was super obsessed with Jack London because I was, you know, little girl growing up in Miami, Florida. He was writing about the snowy cold, you know, gold rush Yukon. And so it was like my first clue into how books could transport you to another place and then an experience you would never have. But again, dead white guy. So it wasn't until really kind of recently where I found Cuban-American authors, because in all honesty, when I started writing Nestor, Nestor was Benjamin. He was white because I didn't think I could write a Cuban character. But then I read Don't Date Rosa Santos by Nina Moreno. I read Sal and Gabby Break the Universe by Carlos Hernandez. And I absolutely fell in love because when I read those stories, I just kept mumbling in my head over and over, oh, me too, me too, me too. Like these characters, they talk like me, they look like me, they have families like me, they have experiences like me. And it almost made me sad for my childhood that I hadn't gotten to have that experience that hopefully kids these days now get to have with some of the more diverse offerings in Kidlit. So for me, it really, the authors that keep me going these days when I'm writing are all the other Cuban-American authors that aren't just putting our stories out there, but I especially love the books where being Cuban-American, that's not the plot of the story. Like, you get to, as a Cuban-American kid, have adventures. You get to be the hero. You get to save the day. And your culture informs you and helps you out, but that's not like the critical, that's not what the book is about. And I love those kind of stories, because I would have loved to have that kind of story growing up. So yeah, I devour like Chantel Acevedo, that has written Muse Squad recently, and just so many of the other Cuban-American authors. I'm so thankful for them, because we're like a small gang now.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it is a huge thing where we don't see a lot of representation of Latinas or Latinos in literature. And if it is there, it's not well known, or, you know, it's one of those things, or they're a side character, or but we never have anyone that is like the main character. And I think that's why this, like your books, all three of your books, really stood out, and they're powerful, you know. Excuse me, sorry. All right, Olivia, you're up.
Okay. Thanks for giving me time. Thinking about it. So yes, representation. Oh my gosh. Like, I also, like Adriana said, like, I didn't grow up reading books where I saw myself. And I think the first time that actually ever happened for me was when I discovered a book called The Dirty Girls Social Club. It's by Elisa Valdez Rodriguez. And it was amazing. And I think that the reason why I read, like, the advertisements around it were like, it's kind of like Sex and the City. And I was like, I like that show. And it's by Latina. Hey, like, you know, that's awesome. And it was, yeah, I mean, they promoted it that way, but it had so much heart. And I loved how she was, each chapter was about a different character. So you got to really dive into their narrative and what's going on with them and their story, you know, what was happening at that moment in their life. And then it also kind of like got to a point where everything kind of intersected. And these were best friends, and it just like, it made me want to hang out with them. Like, I was like, oh man, these girls like would be like my friends, you know, like, or family, because they all had, you know, the culture was so intertwined in there. And I think that there was a lot about Texas in there. I think she might be from Texas, so she was like incorporating things from Texas, and it was just so, it just felt like so much home. Like, it felt like home for me. So yeah, that's the one that I would say was probably, I still will read over and over again, and it's hilarious, and it's got romance. And
I love those books that you can just read over and over again, and you're still surprised by like what happened.
Yes.
All right, let's go ahead and we'll move on to the next one. So, moving on to talking about our culture specifically, like, what aspects of your cultural heritage inspire you as a writer? Let's go ahead and start off with Adriana C. this time.
Okay. So I think for me, what motivates me as a writer is that, so my dad came from Cuba when he was 15. And so when you have to leave your country, and it's a situation where, I mean, he had the clothes on his back, and he had his little suitcase that had 2 changes of clothes, and that was it. And that, when his parents came, and then when my uncle came, it was the same situation. So when you've had to leave your country and start over, you know, you don't have, like, we don't have in my family all these super old family heirlooms. We don't have a lot of photographs. So for me as a writer, what I always try to use is what we were left with. We were left with the recipes that we knew. We were left with our language, and then with our stories that we would tell each other. And so that's what I really try to include, regardless if I'm writing about a witch that can turn into animals roaming the woods. You know, I put my family history in there. In Nestor, he sits down with his abuela, and she tells him her immigration experience, and it basically is what happened to my dad. And she's cooking all the food that I grew up and they're speaking Spanish to each other. So I think like no matter what the story is that I'm writing, food is super important to me. One, because I'm hungry all the time. But that's just something that we had to still show, like even though we were living in this new country and we couldn't bring anything with us, that was still how we showed who we were. And so that's really important to me. And then I include a lot of like Cuban idioms in the books that I write as well, because I love how language varies. Like even though we all speak Spanish, we don't speak the same Spanish. And I love how things vary like that. Like languages fascinate me in that regard. So yeah, I would think for me, the aspects I focus on are food and language differences, and then just the family history that I try to include in my books.
Yeah, that, I mean, food is like the thing of our cultures, of our heritages. It's front and center. We're feeding everybody.
I had a writers group where they would say like, oh my gosh, I don't think my characters have eaten for like 6 chapters. And I'm like, my characters have done nothing but eat for 6 chapters. I don't know what y'all are doing, but that's all they do.
Yeah, it's food. That's our culture. Food. Let's move on. How about you, Adriana H?
Well, food definitely. I definitely have a lot of food in my stories. I mean, I think, like, as you mentioned, I am Afro-Latina. So I think one of the things that I try to do with my books is show that Latinx culture is not a monolith, that there is a lot within us that's you know, from where we come from. I'm from Dominican Republic, and the Afro-Caribbean culture is very different from, let's say, for example, Southern American culture. So that's something that what I do write about, I write the immigrant experience. I'm an immigrant. I came to the U.S. when I was 23 on my own. I came as a graduate student. So I write a lot about, I say that I write realistic romance, I write feminist romance. So I try to show or render like the realities of our lives without really like focusing on like trauma and struggles, and like make them struggle stories. I try to, as much as I can, show the realistic thrust of immigrant life and the intersections of identities and like queer representation. I try to write about queer communities of color, but also like within that we are a culture that's beautiful, that our lives are joyful, that you know, one thing I think a lot about as a Black woman is like the portrayals, the over-sexualized portrayals of Black women in fiction, the over-sexualized portrayals of Latinx women in fiction. And so I try to do some more thoughtful renderings of what it is like for us to fall in love and to have joy in like the intimacy that we have in our partners without it being about us being hypersexualized. And so that's some of the stuff that I write about. So like it's kind of like bigger issues, but all within the context of us and the things that we like that are like come to the surface for people who are Afro-Latinx.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I love specifically how you said unapologetic happy endings in your bio.
Unapologetic.
Yeah, like I love that. I love it so much. And it's the reason why I pointed out that you had like a Latino as well, that you were writing about Latinos, is that especially in romance, we don't see a lot of, you know, the male side of a romance. Typically the main character is female. She's you know, she's not Latina or a woman of color. And so also you have another book called Here to Stay, I believe that's about.
Yeah, that's my latest book. I have a couple other ones that came out earlier this year, but Here to Stay is my latest, and it's the beginning of a series. It's the first in a series, and it's set in Dallas. And that one is a department store romance, and it's also a group of friends, but it's all New Yorkers that have recently moved to Dallas. And the heroine in that book is she works for a nonprofit. She runs a nonprofit for a high-end department store, a foundation, and she's Dominican Puerto Rican. And so her family is in New York City. She moves to Dallas for a boyfriend who dumps her after 2 weeks. So she's given up on love, but of course she meets the hero who is there to cut her job and also make her fall in love with him.
Love that.
As people do in romance.
Oh, I'm gonna have to pick it up. I get so excited with read. Our coworker has got me all into like different books right now that she's trying to get me to read. So
2020 is the year to start reading more books that bring you
there
joy.
we go. That's my new habit I'm picking up. All right, Olympia, what aspects of your cultural heritage inspire you as a writer?
I incorporated so much of my culture. I think that, well, so I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and so I think that just even being a Latina here is different than how it shows up in other areas like California or Texas, New York. And so I incorporated what that's like, you know, to be here and the nature that we're surrounded by. And that's just our environment, but I also feel it's part of my culture too. And so I grew with, I'm from, my family is from Mexico. And when they're both, they both moved here, you know, as adults. And so we weren't really taught a lot of Spanish. It was, when they moved here, like assimilation was a big push. So my sisters and I growing up didn't really, like on purpose, they didn't want to teach us Spanish. So I did grow up hearing it, especially when we went over to California and we were like visiting family, you know, so I understood it a lot. I understood the conversations with my abuelita, but my speaking wasn't as good. It was kind of rusty. So I grew up speaking Spanglish. So you know, all of that to say I grew up speaking Spanglish, and that's definitely in the book. You'll see there's a lot of Spanglish in there. And of course, food. I mean, I think my first chapter starts out talking about pozole. Like, I'm like, pozole is like,
Oh, I'm gonna make me hungry.
But I was like, because it's such a huge part of our culture is the food, and it's not just the food, it's the way that our family interacts with, you know, around the food, and how the food brings us all together as a community. And music too. I was also a salsa dance instructor and a DJ. And so I incorporated that, you know, like my love of salsa dancing was in there. And they go to a Mark Anthony concert because I love him. So, and also other things like connection to ancestors. Also made it into that kind of spiritual sense of like, we understand that connection, like, you know, it's there, it's very much a part of us. And it's speaking to the dead or having a connection to the dead. So all of that made it in there. And yeah.
Oh my God.
Very personal ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as soon as you said the pozole, my stomach growled. Like, it's that time. Okay, let's go. Again, my mouse. Work with me, mouse. So kind of picking back off of that, we kind of touched up on it here and there about immigrating to the United States. So for those of us who have family, or if you were someone that immigrated to the United States, how has their experiences impacted your view of culture as an adult, or as an author, sorry. You know, you kind of touched up on it, Adriana H, you know, their struggles with it, and just how did it kind of, either did it change your view, or did it make your view stronger of your culture? Let's start with Olympia.
Well, I feel like I kind of touched on it a little bit, just the fact that they did immigrate here at the time that they did, and the kind of the the narrative that was going on at that time about assimilation was big, and it definitely impacted our family in so many ways. And I wonder what it would have been like if that narrative had been different at the time, and because I feel like now, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like now, like it's more of a, like people are seeing how beneficial it is and how rich it is to have your culture and to be able to continue to hold on to it and the traditions. And I just wonder if it had been like that then, you know, like how much richer my life would have been, and how much richer my my book might have been. There'd be a whole lot more Spanish in there, and
right. Well,
yeah, I mean,
with-
I'm not saying I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm just saying that's just like, I feel like that's how it's impacted it in that way.
I definitely think generation wise, it's impacted us. I mean, I'm kind of like you, Olivia, where my grandmother, my abuela, she came from Mexico. She, you know, her and my abuelo, and you know, they were kind of ridiculed about speaking Spanish, and so they taught their children to learn English as best as possible. And then when it gets to my generation, my mom didn't teach us Spanish because she was afraid of us being made fun of in school, or things like that. So I definitely agree with you on how different would it be if it wasn't like that back then. So thank you for bringing up those points, or that point. Adriana H, do you want to also chime in on that as well? You came from the Caribbean, so
Yeah, so my experience is a little bit different, I guess, in the sense that I kind of am the immigrant. The rest of my family is still in Dominican Republic, and I came as an adult. I was born and raised in the DR. I did college there. I came here for graduate school, and even in that way, it's different because I had the privilege of coming as a graduate student. You know, I came speaking the language. And so that makes my experience really different than, like, I had some aunts that came in the 60s, my father's sisters, and they, you know, eventually they went back after they retired, but they came, you know, without the language, they came without papers, and they kind of like came kind of like the same thing with like their suitcase to see if they could like make it work here. And so in that sense, I think my experience is a little different. I'm like my own like immigrant story is kind of like recent, but also, you know, I came to New York City in 2002. I didn't feel like I needed to hide my culture. There were like, New York City is like the second largest Dominican city. There's 1 million Dominicans here. So I was very close to my people in a lot of ways. And one thing that was different, and I always say this, I didn't realize I was Black until I moved to the US, because race is very different here than it is there. Of course, we know we're Black in the DR, but you're Dominican first, and there's racism and all kinds of colorism and all kinds of problematic societal things going on in the Dominican Republic. But my own view of myself was different, and that was something that I did, like, it was a new learning of my body, of like the body I walk in here and how that impacts my life. And so that's something that I really show in my books, because there is something, even within our communities, there's colorism, there's racism, there's an invisibility to being Afro-Latinx. You're not really Black, you're not really like seen as the face of the Latinx face that you see in like, if you turn on Telemundo, you don't see Black people. And so that's something that I do write a lot about in my books, because I think now that we do have more people of color writing own voices stories, it's important to write the nuances of the Latinx experience.
I agree that, I mean, it is, I hear a lot about, even just in media, about how there's people don't really understand what Afro-Latina or Afro-Latina is. And so to have you to come into this conversation, I think is very important as well, because regardless of it all, you're Latina. You're still Latina, you know, and you're not trying to be something that you're not. That's one of the things I really see, is that, you know, with Afro-Latinos, it's where do they fit in is what I hear a lot. And it's like, why? You know, they're Latina, they're Latino. We're all the same. We have we have similar heritages and similar cultures. So thank you for sharing that as well. No, Adrianna Cuevas. You're next. I didn't forget you, I promise.
Oh, you're fine. I think for me, like when we are talking about assimilation and our families wanting to kind of blend in, for me, I think what has happened is I've swung the other way with that. So I'm bicultural. My dad is from Cuba and my mom is from Illinois. And so I grew up bicultural, and then now I have married a lovely young man from Oklahoma. And so in raising my son, I've kind of just become where I want to show him my dad's culture and heritage as much as I possibly can, because I see it kind of disappearing, and I want to honor my dad and the journey that he went through. And so I think that's why, like, I cook a ton of Cuban food so that my son can be exposed to it, and speak Spanish with him, and he's learned to say all the things he probably shouldn't have learned to say because he hears it when I'm cooking. But I think for me, with my dad's story, there's just this, it's not an obligation, it's more, I feel like I want to treasure what he went through, and I don't want to lose that. You know, when I was growing up in Miami, you're surrounded by Cuban culture. Your language is everywhere. Your food is everywhere. People who look like you are everywhere. So it wasn't until I moved to the Midwest that I felt like an other, and I felt like I had to cling to my dad's culture because people were pigeonholing and identifying me by it anyways. So why not just really embrace it? And so I think that's kind of what has happened to me, is I just want to do everything I can to make sure that my dad's experiences continue on through my son. And I just don't want to lose that.
Yeah, that really speaks to me, because I'm also technically multicultural. My mom is Hispanic and my dad is Caucasian. And so we've kind of always had this like mixing of the cultures, you know, we've kind of created essentially our own culture, because, you know, we finding a place to kind of fit in and everything, there's no direct slot to it, and some of it is being swept away. Like now recently, my for the past couple of years, as I've gotten older, I've gone and I've made tamales with my abuela for Christmas, and that was both a strategic move, because we all fight over her tamales, and I thought, well, if I help make them, I get first pick. So you know, but it's also because she doesn't write her recipes down, so you have to kind of be there to watch her as she makes it. And it's all about like preserving the culture. And yes, I come from two different cultures, but I like, you know, aspects from both, and I take aspects from both and kind of combine them into a little ball. You know, so, but yes, I agree that some of it is being, you know, I guess kind of lost as the generations go, and it's something to take pride in, though, in being a part of something and sharing it with other people. And I think by writing, that's also an extension of you sharing your culture with other people, all three of you. It's sharing yourself with everyone else. And yeah, that's my little part at the end. All right, so going on to this part, to talking about your books. So as Latina authors, how big of an accomplishment was it to publish your first book, and what did this signify to you? As someone who comes in from a Latina background as well, I mean, there's so many things that I've done that are really big for being Latina, and I want to see what does it mean to you, because it's an accomplishment. It's something amazing, you know. You've potentially done something that your ancestors didn't think of, and you know, so I wanted kind of to see what this signified to you. Let's go off. Let's start with Olivia on this one.
Well, it was like like having a baby in some ways. Yeah, and there was a lot of it's a huge accomplishment, because it's, you know, it's such a, for me, writing my book, even though it was fiction, it was very personal. I had so much of myself in there. So it's also very I saw that Shannon says lots of morning sickness. Yes. Mm-hmm. No, it was it was like, it was insane. It was very personal. There was a lot of rawness around it, and it was like very nerve-wracking, because, you know, it's like basically you're putting your baby out there and you're afraid someone's going to say your baby's ugly, you know. It was like really because you work so damn hard, but on the other hand, it's like, oh my gosh, like I wrote this thing and I stuck to it. I didn't give up on it, and I built this world out of nothing. I just built this whole world and made these characters come to life. And now it's like, I can hold it in my hand. I remember when I picked up my my book in my hand the first time, I was like, oh my God, it's my book. You know, like I was so excited. Yeah, and it was like an accomplishment of my entire family, like all my uncles and aunties and everybody's celebrating, you know, because that's kind of how it is in our community. It's like, you know, it's you know, not just my win, it's everybody's win.
Bring out the food.
So, you bring out the food, yeah. Bring out the food with tequila. Yeah, no, it was huge. It was huge.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. So, and this is your debut. This is your first.
Yeah, it was just not this past August, but the August before that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. And are you working on a second one?
Yeah, I am. I'm working on the second one. I do have to say, though, COVID kind of threw me for a loop, because I started writing the second one before it. And then once COVID hit, it was just like this darkness. Like I just wasn't like, I just couldn't get into my flow the way I really wanted to. So that's why I was kind of chuckling when at the beginning you guys were saying, yeah, what have you taken on, you know, since COVID, and, you know, and like I'm redecorating my house. And I felt a lot of shame about that, because I saw that on social media. People were like, like they're building houses and they're like, you know, writing a thesis. And I was like, yeah, I'm not there at all. Like I am just, you know,
You'll get there.
Position, just like, oh God, you know, because it was a lot. It was like a lot of feelings, and I'm an introvert, and I process things, and
you'll get
my
there.
head a lot. Yeah.
Adriana, how about you? What did this mean to you?
Obviously, like Olivia said, it was definitely like birthing a child. But I think for me, and this I think is sometimes the typical child of immigrants experience, like even though I'm 41 years old, I felt like I wanted to run to my parents and be like, see, I did it. I did something good. Your sacrifices were worth it. I made you proud. You know, it was just, I felt like I had I guess, yeah, the obligation, you know, to do well with my life, given what they had been through. So for me, it was like, yes, okay, good. I did it. But yeah, so this was my debut, and my book published, it was supposed to publish in May, and that didn't happen, and the publication date got pushed to July. So it was super interesting to have a debut come out in our current environment. So in that regard, I think having the support of your family, like you said, it was a massive community celebration when the book published, and I just really had to kind of cling to that and lean into that because everything else around me was unpredictable and going nuts. But no, I think for me, most of all, it was, you know, my parents had put up with me growing up because I pretty much live inside my head all the time. I'm a big, I have no attention span, and I daydream all the time. And my parents wonderfully put up with that as I was growing up and encouraged me, you know, to write stories, to somewhat be productive with that habit that I had. And so really it was very satisfying to finally get to show them something tangible of the results of all your efforts and all their encouragement. So it was very nice.
That's awesome. I love that. And yeah, like you said, the obligation portion of it, I feel that on another,
Yeah.
Adriana H., what about you? What did this signify for you, having your first book published?
Oh, it was, I mean, it's kind of like same kind of piggybacking off of what it's beautiful to be able to like see books that you wished that you wrote because you couldn't find, essentially. So for me, as I said, I've been a lifelong romance reader. I've been reading romance or sneaking reading romance since I was like 12 years old. So for me, it's something that's always been like a place of self-care for me, of comfort. I read all kinds of things, but romance is always something that I read when I want to feel like good, when I want something hopeful. But I have never read a romance with a Dominican protagonist in, you know, almost 30 years reading romance. So that was something that I wanted to see. I wanted to see someone that was like me, that had similar experiences as me, to see my culture and the things that are very particular to my experience be in a book. And so that was really special. And so to know that like there's I'm now like writing books about Dominican people. I have a new series that is not coming out for a little bit. It's coming out in 2022, but it's a historical romance series. It's set in Paris in 1889, and the three protagonists are three Latinas that are at the World's Fair in Paris in 1889.
Yeah.
So it's a Dominican, Mexican, Afro-Mexican, Afro-Dominican, Afro-Venezuelan.
I mean, that's huge, like putting something out there that you haven't seen yet.
Yes, and we were there. Like, what's funny is that I found a writer from Jose Marti, who was a Cuban writer and poet, and he came back from the World's Fair in Paris and wrote up about all the different countries that had pavilions at the World's Fair in Paris, and there were 11 countries from Latin America that were there for the first time, showing kind of their culture in like the world stage. So to me, it's like that sort of stuff where like there's, you know, a billion historical romances out there, but like we're not there, even though we were always here.
You were there, right. And that's just amazing, like putting out that representation and doing that, taking that initiative is incredible as well. So again, there we go. I've been struggling with my mouse. I don't know what's up. All right. So coming back to this, what do you do now to help other young authors find their voice in the writing community? And do you have any advice for them? Adriana H., I mean, we just kind of touched up on that real quick about how you're putting out representation. You're putting out, like, you know, Afro-Latina, Latino, Latinx representation, Dominican Republic representation. So what do you do aside, you know, how do you have any advice for those young authors who are wanting to find their voice in the writing community?
Man, I always say just like lean into it. Like I always say that I'm like a mission driven author. Like I came to do a specific thing, and it was to write about Afro Latinx people, and about writing like realistic renderings of our lives with a hopeful outlook, social justice. So that's like what I came to do, and I don't deviate from that mission. And so that's something that I like. It's important to me. It's every single book I write it will be centered on Afro Latinx culture. And so that helps me stay centered on what inspires me, because what inspires me is my people, my culture, and showing it in the romances that I write. So I think I would say to anybody that's like thinking of writing, you're already an author, like you can already do the writing thing. It's kind of like finding that one thing that only you can put into the space that you're going in to write. Like whether it's YA, middle grade, romance, sci-fi, whatever you're trying to write, is like there's one, the story that you want to tell, only you can tell it, and you have to like be really clear on the reasons why you're doing it.
Yeah, that's powerful. Just go for it. Just lean in.
Just lean in. White people do it all the time.
Okay, Adriana C., what about you? As a middle grade novel writer, what advice do you have for someone wanting to find their voice, a Cuban-American, or even just a middle grader who's wanting to find their voice in the writing community?
Well, I think for me, like, since I taught for 16 years before I started writing and publishing, and so that's kind of what I'm passionate about, is helping young writers kind of find their way, because that was something that when I was in school, creative writing, that is really what I think helped me survive those times emotionally. And so I like doing whatever I can to encourage kids in their writing. And I guess silver lining of our current situation is I've gotten to do a lot of virtual school visits where you get to talk to whole classrooms of kids about their writing. And I think the one thing I just always try to encourage them to do is not to censor themselves, just tell the story that they want to tell. Because I think so many times in school, when you're trying to learn and you're maybe being taught that there is one way to write, this is how you write, and sometimes not all kids are going to write the same way. And so right. I think they end up editing themselves, and that kind of makes you freeze up. And so I really just try to encourage kids to not censor themselves, to just write what you want to write, to try to take risks and be brave in what they're trying to say. Because I think, if you find your voice while you're writing, then maybe that will make you more bold in your life in general. And I think that's really important for kids to develop.
Absolutely. Especially as a young author, as a young kid, write what you want to write. Just put it down on paper, Thank you, Adriana. Olympia, what about you? Any advice?
Well, I would say to just not doubt that you have a story and that your story matters and it's important. Nobody can tell your story for you. Like, you have all of that in you. So even just the fact that you show up and that you want to tell a story is huge. So go for it, and believe in it and make it happen. A lot of people I talk to, it's funny, like once I published my book, people were like, oh, I've always wanted to be an author. But I talk myself, like, for one reason or another, they never did it. They talk themselves
not good enough. I don't write as good,
Yeah. They give up on their dream. And so, like, what I would say is, like, don't let that happen to you. Just keep going. You have to, like, really believe in your dream and just keep going. Yeah. Your story is so important. Make it happen. Just write it. Do it a little bit at a time, but just don't give up on it.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, all that advice, I mean, yeah, just go for it. I really appreciate that. We do have a lot of kids here at LearningQuest who have dyslexia, and so reading and writing is, something that they kind of struggle with a little bit. And so, I mean, just any of that advice as well is just go for it. Go and just write, put it on paper. One of my coworkers was telling me today is don't edit yourself. Just keep going. Just keep going. You can edit later. Just as you're writing, just write. Just put all your thoughts on paper.
Yes.
All right. And we're a little bit ahead of the game. So we're going to go ahead and open up to Q&A. Rochelle, was there any in the chat?
I do have a couple questions. The first one is, what are you ladies reading right now yourselves?
Ooh.
Besides the work you do for your own writing, what are you reading? What's on your book stand? Go ahead.
Let's start with Adriana C, because Adriana C has a huge, huge shelf.
Oh God. I love talking about and like recommending books, so I promise I won't do too much, but I do have some. No, so right now I try to read mostly middle grade since that's what I write, but I read quite a bit of YA too, just from various author friends, and so I just finished reading Blaze Wrath Games by Amparo Ortiz. She's Puerto Rican, and it's basically if the World Cup had dragons. It's amazing. Yes, it is so good. It's a wonderful book. I read it on NetGalley before it published, but it just came out last week, Tuesday. And it's really good because it also has, Amparo is a friend. She and I always DM each other on Twitter so we can talk about K-pop because we're both huge BTS fans. And she put K-pop in her Puerto Rican Dragon World Cup novel. And I just love that because I think it shows that, like, yes, we contain multitudes, but this is a really excellent, excellent book that I super loved, YA. And then I think I also really, this is my favorite book for this season, is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. It's Day of the Dead, where the main character summons a ghost and then the ghost won't leave. The ghost won't leave him alone. But the amazing thing that I absolutely love about this book is that it was the first YA to make the New York Times bestseller list with a trans main character. And I love the representation that this has, and it's so well done. And the story is amazing. I loved it. I cried the first time I read it, and I think I've read it like 3 times, and it's still, it's a wonderful book. So for YA, those would be my choices. And I won't keep going, even though I could show you my whole shelf.
She pulls out all the books.
Exactly.
Adriana H, what about you?
I'll concur on Cemetery Boys. I have not read Blaze Wrath Games, although I have it.
Good.
And yeah, so I usually I'm reading a few things at a time. I'm usually reading something on my Kindle, something hardcover, something on audio. Right now I am reading, one that I have to recommend is You Had Me at Ola, if you read romance. It's by Alexis Daria. She's a good friend of mine, but that's not the reason why I'm recommending the book. It's a really great book about 2 Latinx soap opera actors they're both Puerto Rican in New York City, and it's a wonderful book, but it's also, talks about Hurricane Maria and PTSD and like normalizing mental therapy and like taking care of your mental health. And for Latinx culture, I think it's like a super important thing. And it's also super steamy and also super hot, and there's a happy ending. The other book that I read this summer that I really like is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, which
Yes, I just started it. I just started it because my
Phenomenal.
coworker Shannon, who's in the audience, she recommended it to me, and she's like, I need someone to talk about with it. So
It's
she just
phenomenal.
recommended it to me. I'm so excited to get that started. What was the first one called? You Had Me at Hola?
You Had Me at Hola by Alexis Daria. And the other one that I would recommend to romance is The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa. She's an Afro-Brazilian author, and it's a rom-com about a Afro-Brazilian wedding planner who gets jilted at the altar and then ends up being paired with his brother who broke up the wedding for a job interview, and they of course fall in love. It's so good. It's like legitimately hilarious, and it's also like a beautiful rendering of Afro-Brazilian culture, which we rarely see in fiction. So that one is also a book that I probably recommend like forever because it's just perfect.
All right. Thank you for that. I'm so excited that you recommended Mexican Gothic. I cannot wait to get it. I've just started it. So all right. Olympia, what books are you reading right now?
So I have been reading So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo. And so I should say that my job right now, I was promoted recently to a job that's around racial justice and equity. So this is a lot of, it's very heavy stuff. And so I have been reading that book and also taking a break just for self-care reasons. And I haven't actually gotten into a book for joyful reasons lately. Like I kind of need one. So I've been writing down everything furiously because I really need something light, because my world right now is it's a lot of heaviness. It's a lot of trauma for me. It brings up a lot of personal trauma. So yeah, I am really excited to get into these guys actually.
Would you guys mind putting into the chat the books you recommended? And then everyone will see it. And then when we send out a copy of this, they'll get the transcript anyway. Because I'm pretty sure they want to know. They want to know, especially how do you spell it? What's the author's name? Everything.
I want it to fill my Amazon cart. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm real excited to get started on this book. I have so many books that I'm just like slowly like panning through.
So I have one more question before we open up and unmute everybody. So when we talked about what advice you give to readers, this one's more geared towards to the authors. This one's geared towards your readers. So if you were to speak to your readers and give them one message, it's kind of like the underlying message you put in all your books and how you write and everything. What's that message that you want to give to your reader? Who wants to go first?
You want to start, Adriana H?
I try, like what I try to do, and I have all down all these like little like branding things. So my brand is I write romance full of people who look and sound like my people getting unapologetic happy endings. And I think what I try to do is give the reader, and like of course like when I'm writing, I'm thinking of readers that are like me. And I'm delighted and grateful that a lot of other people that are not like me or that have my same background read my books, but that's the reader that I think about when I'm writing. And so for that reader is like, hey, here's a book with like you in it. And then, but mostly what I want people to get from my books is that, like, I think Adriana C said it, we contain multitudes, that we're not a one-dimensional thing, that we are like whole people, entire humans, that we don't just like I always say, like there's so much of the representation of us that it's like just this person that hatches on the page or on the screen. Like we come with no history, and my intention when I write is to show that we have that we contain so much, and a lot of it is joy.
Yeah. That's a very big portion of it, especially in romance, having that joy and having those moments, you know, that especially with other representation, it's important to have in literature. I know we were just at you, but Olympia, what do you hope your readers to kind of gain from, what message would you want to give them with your books and everything?
I think for me, I hope that my authenticity and my heart comes across when people read it, like that they feel an emotional connection, and that they understand just the importance of love and family. Like, I think that's the biggest thing that I want people to take away, is just that connection with family, and yeah, and the power that you have together.
Yeah.
And when you lead with love, like, you just can't go wrong, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's a very strong message. And actually, I mean, family is very important in our cultures too. So it's a big one. All right, Adriana Cuevas.
I think for me, what I absolutely love about writing for middle grade readers is that age group of books, regardless of what the story's about, they tend to center hope. There's not as much cynicism like you may see in YA or in some of adult fiction. And so that's what I really love about telling stories for middle grade readers. And so I think specifically in my own books, I do try to center hope, you know, regardless of what your main character is going through. There's just this sense of empowerment and figuring out your place in the world, and figuring out who you are. But at the same time, there's a hopeful aspect to all of that. And I like that positivity, that it's not that everything is rosy and everything is great. Terrible things do happen, and we can recognize that, and it's okay to be upset, and it's okay to be sad. But I love, in my books at least, surrounding my main character with found family, people they didn't expect to come into their lives and to support them and help them out, and kind of help them figure out those big questions that they're trying to answer, because middle grade readers are struggling with huge questions. And so I like the idea of found family, and just kind of sticking to other people to help you find your way.
Yeah. Oh, I love all this. I love this so much. It's giving me like butterflies and everything. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And are there any more questions, Rochelle, or was that the last one?
No, that's the last one, but go ahead and show the next slide, because that's a big one.
Yes.
Before we go into gallery view and stop the share, so we can see everybody.
Yes.
Who's on their video.
Just as a reminder, these are the author's books. So we have the Dreamer series by Adriana Herrera. We have Sisters of Element by Olympia, Salazar de Breaux, and we have the Total Eclipse of Nestor, Lopez by Adrianna Cuevas. And you can find their books. We'll go ahead and we'll link those in the email afterwards. I want to say a huge thank you to our authors who came in today and agreed to do this. You all, even though it was so last minute, it was all just kind of up in the air for a good while, but thank you so much for being a part of this. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to do something for the community and be a part of this conversation. And so thank you, all three of you. I really appreciate you guys.
This has been a complete honor.
Yes.
Sharing your time and hearing from you all, and honestly seeing some of the chat going on, it's been really great.
Yeah.
So let's open it up. This has been one of the best panels I think I've ever listened to, and you know, we've done them a lot, but this has really hit home for a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So if you guys switch over to your gallery view on your Zoom platform page thing, you'll be able to see people or names of people.
I see Shannon.
So I will unmute all. And then Shannon, go ahead and unmute yourself. And Shannon has a really good question. Go for it.
Okay, I have like a million. So first of all, like I wish you guys could see my desk with all my sticky notes because I was taking notes as you were talking so that I would have stuff to say. So the thing that resonated with me was how you all spoke from your culture and wanted that represented out there in the world. I'm a keen reader and I travel by book because I've always been too poor to travel and my history does not allow, you know, my childhood didn't allow that. And it's true, as well read as I am, there were not a lot of Latina books out in the world. And I read everything, like everything I could get my hands on. And I'm so happy that I get to offer that to my kids who are also well-read kids, diversely so. So the question was a big one. Okay. So COVID hits, you're in the middle of writing, and I know that Adriana, I'm not going to say it as pretty as Yvonne does, so Adriana, you were talking about how you're in the middle of publishing your book coming up, and it's coming out in May, and then gets pushed to July. And my heart was like, oh my God, that
was mine.
crazy scary, right? So those of you that were writing, because I think you were too, did it change the direction of your characters? And like, if so, or like you thought your book was going in this direction as much as you can, but then COVID hits, you're stuck, you know, like it's a really different kind of place now. So go, tell me how it changed, because I'm so keen to hear this.
For me, I was waiting for Nestor to come out, anticipating that. And so then there was that shift, but luckily I had already finished and sold my second book. So that was tucked away and I felt like I had some cushion, I guess, with that. But I was working on my third manuscript at the time. And I will say, like, once I got over I don't want to say shock. It was just a surprise that I had the publication delay. In retrospect, it was the best thing that could have happened. I did not want to release a book in May. It would have been like a fart in a hurricane. It would have been terrible. Right. So I think it was just, I fixate on things. And so I had fixated on that date and I just needed to come to terms with that change. So once I did, and I could focus on this third manuscript, it actually ended up being a good thing for me to have all that time. Despite the fact that my son was practicing the bassoon over virtual school, I managed to write a third manuscript, but I had finished it in April, at least I thought I had. But looking back at it, I realized I wanted to take out this one plot point because in this middle grade novel, I had been heavily relying on Santeria, which is an Afro-Cuban religion. And the more and more that I looked at it in my manuscript, I thought, you know what, this is not my story to tell. I'm not going to use this aspect. I'm not going to use Santeria in my book. But by taking it out, like it was an easy fix in the beginning, and then it just snowballed as the manuscript went on, and I ended up having to rewrite the entire book. Oh. Had COVID not happened, I probably would have just turned the manuscript into my agent. But because I knew I had all this time, I felt like I could be more retrospective or introspective, I guess, in my book and really be picky with what was the best way to tell it. And so it was a good thing for me that this happened, because then I took from April to, I think I just finished it last month, and I really could make it right and what it needed to be. So for me, it was not an entirely bad thing, but I just had to kind of come to terms with my new reality. And once I did that, I could be productive again.
How about you, Olivia?
So I had just started on book 2 in my Luna Sisters series, and my character, like, it was getting very dark. The girls were drinking way too much, and it's a young adult book. So I was like, yeah, I need to put this away for a minute. It just, yeah, it really did affect me. It was interesting how it did. It just felt like just a sense of dread and of like, at the time I was also like, oh my God, there's just too much information coming in. I just feel like information overload and just like so much going on in the world right now. And so it was really affecting my writing. And yeah, so I had to put it away for a minute. I had to put it away before I started getting back to it. And I think that was a really good thing though. Like it allowed me to just kind of step back and just kind of be in myself, you know, introspective for a minute. Just care for my heart, you know, because that's a really important thing, because writing is a very, gosh, it's super exhausting. Like it's super emotionally draining and you need your whole self in order to do it. So, you know, I was able to take a step back and then also just keep on formulating it in my head, you know, very organically, kind of like how the first book came about too. So, you know, I'm still in the process of writing it, and it's all, a lot of it's coming up here. And it's good. Like, I feel like I'm going to write it from a place of joy, because that's kind of how I did the first one. Oh,
No.
No joy, no
like,
joy.
don't write from a place of joy.
That really resonates, Olivia. Thank you. Adriana, with your
Roasting up here. I have to come get something.
your
to eat.
romantic, like your, I mean, are you writing right now, and is it affecting your there will be a happy ending? Because I'm all down for happy endings these days.
Oh, it's a rule. I can't break it. They all have to have a happy ending. If it's not, then it's not a romance anymore. So romance is really fast. I've had, like, this year had 6 releases. So it's like, you just, like, it's, the turnaround is really fast. So, so like when it first happened, me and my friends were panicking. It's like, are they gonna have to wear a mask? Because, like, how are they gonna kiss?
Good point.
But also then publishing takes forever, right? So I'm hybrid. Like, I do a little bit of, I do like kind of a few projects on my own, but I'm like traditionally published. My publisher is Harlequin. And so everything that I've committed to writing, or like everything that's already in the pipeline, will not, like, I'm just gonna write it as I planned it, essentially. And I don't like, it's I've always tried to keep like my romance reading and my romance writing as like my place of self-care and joy. So I'm trying to like protect that place and protect that time. And I have been able to write. Like right now I am writing a category romance. It's my first category romance for Harlequin, and it's a series that's coming out next year. It's called Zambrano Studios, and it's a Dominican family that owns a telenovela studio, and their lives are as dramatic as their telenovelas. It's very over the top. It's like ridiculous.
I love it.
Embezzlement, there's paternity, like fake paternity tests, like it's
Who's
like
the father?
it's a soap opera. So it's been really fun, because I'm like this is the craziest thing I've ever written, but it's been super fun. So yeah, there were moments in the beginning where I was just like, I don't know how I'm gonna get myself to buy into any happiness right now.
Right.
But it's worked out. It's worked out. And I was writing historical for a good chunk of the summer, and I was like in 1879 in Paris, and it was fine there. Like, it was really nice.
Thank
I
you.
love the whole mask and having to kiss. That was.
I was like, I had a friend, I was on a chat with my friend. I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it.
How are we doing on time? Actually,
We're actually perfectly on time.
good. So again, I just want to thank you ladies for being a part of this, and I want to thank everyone who came in and, you know, participated as well, our audience. I see a few familiar faces, so I'm really happy that this turned out how it did. I want to thank Rochelle for being my behind the scenes girl and encouraging me to do this. So thank you for that. And you'll all get a copy of the notes once it's done. You'll get a copy of everything, links and all, where you can find the books, and I think we're good.
Thank you guys so much. This was wonderful.
you.
Yes,
Thank
you guys
you.
are amazing. Everyone, have a good night. Have a safe night. Enjoy the rest of your week. And then I hope we can all connect again on something like this. This is great. Maybe bigger next time, right?
Yes.
Always. Thank you guys so much. This has been a lot, so much. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
you.
Good night. Bye.
Night.
Everybody.